Now, be honest. How much time do you actually put aside to prioritize your mental health? And if you're an employer, is it actually in your Outlook calendar to look after your team? Well, my guest today on the Mental Space podcast, I'm delighted to say, was one of the winners at the Mental Awards 2023 for prioritizing just that. My guest today, welcome Lianne Braganza D'Sylva, who's the Chief Marketing Officer and Customer Experience Lead at Cigna Healthcare, Middle East and Africa. Welcome to the Mental Space podcast, Lianne.
Thank you. Good to be here.
I'm delighted. I've wanted to have this conversation for a while. So, we have a tradition on the podcast, which is the first question we ask all our guests is, what is your definition of mental health? What does mental health mean to you?
So mental health for me means having the ability to wake up each morning feeling positive about the day and being able to, even if it's a stressful day, being able to come to the office or go to your workplace feeling like you are going to be productive.
And how is your mental health today then?
It's okay.
It's okay.
It's on a scale of 1 to 5.
That feels like a real answer.
It's a 3.5. I'm a bit stressed at the moment because I, have a lot of stuff going on, but I'm looking forward to my holiday that I'll be going on in a few weeks, where I know I'm going to be able to recharge and come back feeling rejuvenated.
How often do you find that as well? And because sometimes I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to be happy every day. I mean, when we say mental health is that ability to wake up each morning, is it each morning or is there perhaps a ratio that you aim for? Is it the majority?
I think the important thing is, at least for me, is not to judge a day.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Or to judge yourself if you've had a bad day. There are times that I feel like I have to pull back when I'm reflecting at the end of the day, and if something hasn't gone well, I do have the tendency to judge it and, regurgitate it again and again. And I found that I don't need to do that.
Okay.
I just, I acknowledge that it maybe didn't go as well, but I say, hey, tomorrow's another day. So that piece for me allows me to wake up in the morning still feeling good about the day.
It's a new day.
It's a new day.
Yeah.
And,
I kind of want to burst into song now, but...
preparing for the fact that if it doesn't go well, it's not going to sully the entire week.
Because I think that's something, that's definitely something that I have been guilty of a lot in the past particularly, which is that catastrophizing.
Yes.
That, as you just said there, when you have a bad day, it doesn't end at the end of that bad day. You carry it into the next one.
Yeah.
Is that something you've always been able to do, or has that been a journey of realizations that's helped?
I've been terrible at managing my my own voice, so to speak. It has been a journey. And it's been a journey of self-realization reflected back to me by my son.
Okay.
So I did not realize it, but it was only when I was trying to coach him that I realized that I'm a perfectionist.
Right.
And being a perfectionist makes you put undue pressure on yourself. So I couldn't lecture him on being a perfectionist when I myself am one. So that journey of self-awareness and then recalibrating how I see myself has been a direct result of me being a mother.
Oh, wow. Because I wanted to ask, we've known each other for maybe 2 years, and you have been incredibly supportive and incredibly passionate about our mission at Mental since day one. And I wanted to go ask, now, where does that passion, that desire to support well-being, where does that come from? Because is that something you've always had? Were you always an empathetic individual, which is why you ended up in the healthcare profession? Or have there been challenges that have taught you and shaped your path?
I would say that there are two factors that, shaped me and also made me look at mental health in an entirely different way. The first one was our work around the Cigna Stress Care campaign, which started around 20 2017 into 2018.
Yeah.
We did a lot of research around the impact of stress on your emotional well-being as well as on your physical well-being.
Okay.
And those clinical studies taught me to look at stress and, all of its influencing factors very differently. So that was the first piece for me.
Okay.
And we identified the difference between chronic stress and stress that, keeps your adrenaline pumping to meet a deadline.
Yeah.
The second factor was going through my mom's illness. So she was diagnosed with cancer, and I was the one supporting her and my father through the illness. And it made me think about the so-called sandwich generation very differently.
Yeah.
Because we talk about it as a statistic, but when you're living it, it's something completely different. So it gave me a different view about female leaders and how we have to show up to work and how not every day is going to be your best day.
Yeah.
And everyone has something that's going on, behind the scenes. And then the second piece is not just females, but also my own team and, what they're probably going through, because I was very lucky to have great support when I was struggling with my mom's illness, both from Cigna and my bosses, but then also from my team. And that had a huge impact on how I see people when I meet them for the first time, and whether or not I choose to make first impressions of them anymore.
Yeah. And it's funny because it feels, and I hope we're at least at the beginning, if perhaps a little bit further down the road, of employees beginning to realize that, I once had a job where I offered to work 22 hours a day. And I said, I need an hour in the morning to take my daughter to school and an hour at night to read her a bedtime story, because that's about as sacred as it gets for me. And the response was, don't let your personal life get in the way of your job.
Wow.
I think we're moving beyond that to recognize that actually what's happening in employees' lives and our team members' lives is actually something that needs to be considered. If you're going to help them become as productive a member of the team as possible, what happens at home will impact what happens in the workplace.
Absolutely.
I think for anyone who's listening or watching that is not just familiar with the term, the sandwich generation, because I think it's really pertinent to this part of the world as well, isn't it? Because I think there's an extra pressure. The sandwich generation, I'll let you explain. Tell me.
So yes, the sandwich generation is typically the generation that are from the ages of about, 35 to 50, and they are the ones who are caught between bringing up young kids and dealing with aging parents.
Yeah.
And oftentimes you find that it's a scary balance.
Yeah.
And they are sandwiched between the two and are oftentimes having to figure out which one to prioritize.
I think it's fascinating. Well, not fascinating. I think there's an extra challenge as well, isn't there, for us expats that are living here in this region, because that we're not just down the road from them as well. And often our kids might be here, but our parents are a 4, 5, 8 hour flight away.
Yes. And especially for those that are maybe don't even have their immediate family here, and are still trying to juggle, their aging parents sending money home, or trying to be there for them over the phone. It's quite a delicate balance to deal with being an expat and probably being isolated, but still having to show up for work, and then being able to look after your parents financially and emotionally.
How much do you feel COVID has changed our perception? Because I think we were all separated from families during that period. And I think employees were a little bit forced down the road. Like you say, you at Cigna have been leading the way. You've been doing the stress kit 2017 ahead of the game. How do you think COVID actually changed the conversation or has changed the game?
I think COVID in many ways has been very good from an organizational perspective, in that it has demonstrated to companies that employees can work from home and still be productive, right? Previously, you'd have an employer saying, well, if my employee's working from home, they're watching TV all day. I mean, we all know that's not the case.
Yeah.
If they were watching TV all day or were unproductive all day, they would be unproductive at work and at home. It doesn't matter that they're at home. So I think COVID enabled that, work from home capability. But COVID also maybe exacerbated the isolation and disconnect from work colleagues. So I think it's important to recognize the importance of social connections and working from an office environment, but then also the flexibility that it provides people when they work from home.
If we stay with the piece around employment, and this is perhaps where we come in on Cigna winning at the Mental Awards in 2023, you won the Outstanding Contribution to Mental Health in Healthcare through your 5% pledge. Our judges absolutely loved that, and on the night you joined us and lifted the trophy, and it was amazing to see. Why didn't you tell us, because I think this is really, really important, why didn't you tell us some of the pillars of the 5% pledge, what the 5% pledge is?
So the 5% pledge is actually a call to action to leaders and individuals to devote 5% of their working time towards talking about mental health and fostering a culture of dealing and delivering mental health strategies in the workplace. And what we do is we've been targeting organizational leaders to walk the talk, so to speak, and get them to sign a pledge online that says that they are going to dedicate 5% of their time towards advocating mental health in the workplace. And some of our leaders have really taken that down the line by putting time on their calendar, right, like around 2 hours a week to talk about that. And some leaders are, using that as a call to action to start letting their employees know that it's okay not to be okay at work.
I mean, just talking about that I love that strategy of sticking it in the Outlook calendar, because I know for myself, like, if I want to show up for myself, and how often do we show up for everybody else, but never for ourselves? So, do you put that gym time, do you put that mental health time in your Outlook calendar? Because there's always going to be a competing pressure. So where is it on your scale of priorities? And again, you talked there about 2 hours. I mean, I think I did the maths on this one, and it worked out around 2.5 hours a week, which might not seem massive. But then if you're a leader, that's more than 100 hours a year. If you were to sit down and just go, right, I'm going to spend 100 hours thinking about the mental health of my team, that's a sizable chunk of time.
That's right.
And then if you get 10 of your leadership team and you 10x, that's 1,000 hours. There's something really, really sort of special you can do with that time. How have you found the response so far, both sort of internally within Cigna and your teams, and externally in the response in the wider business community to the campaign?
The response internally has been absolutely overwhelming. Both at the leadership level as well as at a supervisory level, employees have embraced it. And I think there are, a few things that we did deliberately as a leadership team. So one is, of course, Jerome, our CEO. He's a massive advocate of, talking about mental health and what he calls taking time for yourself. And he, follows that through. So we did a few things. We ensured that, one, we had a cohort of employees sign up for mental health first aiders course, which means that, peer-to-peer, we have employees who are now trained to look out for the signs of someone struggling in the office. Secondly, we hired Dr. Louise Lambert to come in and do courses on positive psychology at work. Very simple strategies that we can equip managers with around inculcating, ways to encourage and develop your employees in the office. Because one of the key things that she's always mentioned is that, employees don't leave an organization. They leave their manager. So her view is that the supervisory level also needs to be enabled to think about how they manage their employees. And then thirdly, we've just started as a leadership team to be more open about the struggles that we have in the office. And, we start to talk about, we're more open in team meetings about employees that are struggling and need help. So I think these three things have created open dialogue in the organization, and they've also made us as leaders be more accepting of different ways in which employees show up to work, and also their different needs as it relates to how they work.
You're a leader within your organization. How has opening up, and I know you've spoken about this before, how is opening up about, what's happening with you and being honest with what's happening with you, and your challenges as a leader with your team, how's that helped you as a leader? Because often that old idea of leadership is I must have all the answers and I must be right all the time, which is almost an impossible pressure to live up to.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's helped me grow tremendously, not just as a leader, but also as a person, also as a mom, also as a spouse. And it has allowed me to be more accepting of who I am, and it's allowed me to be more authentic. And what that's done is I've seen, not just people in my team, but people around me start to come up to me and talk about areas where they're struggling. Simultaneously, we've also had, key leaders in our organization sign up to be coaches.
Okay.
And that's taken us on a journey of self-discovery. But then that coaching mentality, along with us bringing our authentic selves to work and allowing ourselves to be vulnerable at work, has made me feel more courageous, more brave, but also made me recognize when I see the signs of someone struggling in the office, and allows me to have an open conversation with them, or at least propose an invite to talk.
What I love about this campaign is the fact you targeted leaders. And I know Dr. Louise talked about it. We've got her coming on the podcast soon as well. She's amazing. Brilliant. I quote her too often. I always give her the copyright on it. But where we talk about why it's so important for leaders to embrace this with inside organizations, because without their buy-in, how do we actually change cultures? Why for you is it so important to target leaders with your campaign?
I think leaders are culture catalysts, right? Employees are constantly looking to see what their leaders do. They're observing the words they speak, and they're looking at their actions. So for us, it was important to engage leaders because I think if they start the conversation around mental health and they start demonstrating that it's okay to talk about this openly, it, at least in the organization, it removes the stigma around talking about mental health. And we've seen, as we've started to do this campaign, that externally as well, as we put this out, we've had more than 1,400 pledges for the 5% campaign online.
Wow.
We've also had companies that have proactively invited us into their organization with the stress kit to have used the stress kit as a starter for how to talk about mental health and what it means, because not every leader is comfortable broaching the topic on their own. So they use that as a way to, get the conversation going. And we've also had leaders commend us on, how much this has helped them prioritize both mental health and emotional well-being at work. And it's we give companies talking points around what this entails, and we give them strategies and toolkits for how to run these programs in the office.
Yeah.
So there've been a lot of sign-ups for our programs as well on the website.
I'm trying to do the maths on 1,400 times those 200 hours, or no, the 100 hours. But it all adds up into a significant chunk of time where people are beginning to, in leadership positions, think about mental health. Interesting piece of research that you recently brought to the market, the UAE edition of your vitality study. Now, obviously, I'm a massive fan of your annual wellbeing surveys. This year, you've kind of evolved it from the wellbeing study to almost a more rounded view, taking in other different factors to have the vitality study. Would you want to tell our listeners what that slight difference between the wellbeing surveys that perhaps they know to the vitality study?
Correct. So the vitality study, as you said, is an evolution of our 360 wellbeing survey that we used to put out. And what it has done is it has now become slightly more encompassing to include factors like emotional well-being, financial well-being, physical well-being, social well-being, occupational well-being, but also even spiritual well-being.
Yeah.
Because all of these factors impact a person's ability to stay upbeat, to bring their most productive selves to work, but also to be resilient. So we found that capturing all of these different aspects as self-reported by individuals have enabled us to understand a person's ability to thrive both at work as well as outside of work.
What I like about it is it's actually wider this time as well, because we've got things like finances in there, we've got emotions, we've got work. You split it up into it because each of them are a lever which pushes or pulls on our mental health at any one time. Can you take our listeners through just some of the top level figures for the UAE that you captured in the vitality study this year?
Sure. So I think the good thing about the vitality study from a UAE perspective, and even from a Saudi perspective, is that the UAE is leading on the vitality index of about 32% as opposed to the global average of 17%.
Yeah.
Saudi's vitality score is at 38. So both the UAE and Saudi are doing really well. Females are doing slightly better than males this year on the vitality score.
I won't make a joke.
And the leading cohort or the leading segment for vitality scores are the millennials.
Okay.
And so they are the ones that have reported the highest vitality scores, both globally as well as in the UAE. For the UAE, though, it's important to remember that whilst they are reporting high levels of vitality, stress is still a leading factor, with 89% of respondents saying they suffer from stress and 99% of the respondents reporting feeling burnout symptoms.
And that, to me, like when I read the research, it really felt like it kind of nailed our experience here in the UAE. Because if you look around the world right now, this is one of the best places to be in the world. When you see that with the 32% versus the 17%. And I noticed there was another one where you asked people to rate their overall well-being as, do they rate it as good or excellent? And I think here it was something like 58% in the UAE,
Correct.
Whereas down in the poor old UK, it was less than half of that.
Right.
And when you look back at the UK, is no surprise why. But that aside, so we've got that. It's the best place to be. But when it comes to the workplace, there's still lots of challenges. And I look at that with this kind of 32%. I know the UAE is not going to be happy with that. I know the UAE is always going to want to go better. It wants to be the happiest place on the planet. So what about that other 68%? We've seen what the government's been doing. I mean, even today, there's been, as we record this podcast, there's been another federal rule out about flexible working for the public sector. Right. We've seen the 4.5 working day week. We've seen the labour courts overhauled so that they give more access to employees so they get fairer treatment. We've got green visas, we've got golden visas, we've got unemployment insurance. They've taken the gratuities off employers so that the employers can't use that as a lever. What do you think the responsibility of the private sector is to helping the government, the UAE, achieve that goal? Because we can see when we talk to people in the public sector, we can see when we hear from the government leaders, the direction of travel is only one way: more well-being, not less.
Right. And I want to add a little bit of nuance to that 89%. I think the important thing to remember as you talk about the UAE and how it's creating a favorable environment for people to live and work, at the end of the day, the UAE is an ambitious nation, right? And even as we work and live here, we're ambitious as well. So
Absolutely.
I think that 89% needs to be taken with that in mind. We're all ambitious. We all want to grow. We all want to, achieve our goals, financial goals or, career goals. So that kind of feeds into why we drive ourselves.
Yeah.
The UAE is also, puts innovation at the forefront of everything that they're doing. So we tend to follow that through. And how many of us are doing innovative things today? You're a prime example of that. I mean, what were your work days like when you were setting up mentl, right?
The clue is in the name. And it remains so. But again, it is. I come back to that burnout question as well, which is 99%. It feels. I look at that 68% as a massive, the opportunity, the potential there for us to get better at all of this. Because again, when we drill down into the figures, remember, actually, if we were talking about people feeling always on, again, I think it was close to about 9 in 10, wasn't it? It was about 89%. Yes. If we looked at the hours that people are working, and again, ambition plays a part in that. Opportunity also playing a part in that. It's almost like is it a nice problem to have in a way? Because you could go to somewhere else, whether it be Europe, whether it be UK, US, and maybe you haven't got the opportunity to work so many long hours.
Yes.
You haven't got the opportunity to burn out. So there's room for improvement, I feel, within that 68%. And again, we were looking at the hours here. What is it, 32%, I think, of people, a full third of people said they were working longer than regular hours.
That's right.
So, ambition. But I think the ambition is then that we can still be a good business it's good business to be a good business. I'll come back and go, private sector's responsibility, to try and do some of the work that, Cigna has been doing.
Yes.
You're doing the work. That doesn't mean you're at the end of the destination yet. No, do we ever get there? I'm not sure we do. But what do you feel is the private sector's responsibility to make sure that we can continue to advance that 32% feeling vital up to the 40s, to the 50s, and then into the majority?
I think there are a couple of things that could be done, right? I mean, so firstly, employees have said that 61%, to be precise, have said that they, when they come to the office, they feel like, they can concentrate better.
Okay.
Another 44% of them have said that coming to the office, fosters the social connections that they need to help them, have better vitality scores. So I think it's got to be a combination of things that the private sector needs to be doing. One is employees are consistently asking for flexibility. So flexibility with regards to having a hybrid workplace where they can work from home, but also choose when they want to work from the office. The other piece is employers maybe putting more tools in the hands of employees to help them get the help that they need, whether it is having access to employee assistance tools or using technology to have conversations with psychologists or psychiatrists if they need help and support, and also maybe employers getting the right health insurance plans, ones that provide them with rich access to care and psychiatric help. The other thing that we've noticed that provides success for employees is when employers are able to bring in mental health first aiders to train their employees and how to manage someone who's struggling, but also how to look out for the signs for someone who's either stressed or overwhelmed or dealing with various issues. And one of the key things that we have seen employees tend to ask for is financial health training. So one of the largest drivers of stress has been the cost of living crisis and an inability to manage finances. So we run what we call a Connect for Health series, which are virtual learning series. And we always ask our audience to tell us what they want to hear about or what training they want. Time and time again, almost every year, we get asked to provide a financial advisor or provide training on how to manage finances. So I think employees can pick that up and start to give employees some of these trainings as well.
You've been very generous with your time. I just 2 questions finally. Firstly, coming back to some of the stuff you said, how important is it to create that culture around mental health? Because I did see one of the statistic in that report, which basically said that almost like 2/3 of employees still felt that employees prioritized productivity over mental health and well-being, which is interesting because if you prioritize mental health and well-being, you get increased productivity. If you just prioritize productivity, it goes the other way.
Right.
So how important do you feel that culture piece? Within all of those tools, we can have all these strategies, but the underlying culture where the leaderships are saying 5% of our time at the very least, we are prioritizing, we are focused, it's in our Outlook calendar.
So I think one of the other interesting pieces of statistics that came out was that employees did know, 71% of them did say that employees are recognizing the importance of mental health.
That's
right?
hopeful.
Which is great. But like you said, you still have employers that are prioritizing productivity over mental health.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be important as the post-pandemic changes continue to impact our lifestyle and the way we live and work, is for employees to start to create a space for things like, intellectual improvement. So we've been told that 79% of employees or the respondents find that when they learn something new or when they improve their intellectual capabilities, that they feel like they can provide more at work and they feel more resilient. So
that's fascinating because we never hear about that as a...
This is the first time as well for me.
Yeah.
So, how can we foster learning in our work environment and then continue to create opportunities for those social connections within the work environment for employees to thrive? I think the last point that I want to make is around another piece of statistic that employees told us, that 2/3 of them have said that they would be willing to take a lower paying job in order to have more time with family. So that is a very, very interesting trend that we need to reflect upon.
That's a powerful statistic. That's a powerful statistic for employees too. And almost feels like a mic drop moment there.
Yes, absolutely.
Final question, and we always ask this. What gives you hope when we look forward to 2024? Is 2024 going to be the year where the penny really does drop on mental health and well-being in the workplace?
People like you give me hope, Scott. The conversations that we're having right now gives me hope. The 1,400 sign-ups for our pledges give me hope.
Yeah.
The 50 employers that wrote to us asking us to bring the stress kit to their offices gives me hope. So the work that the UE government is doing to bring true policy change around mental health and the recognition of that gives me hope. So there are just so many beautiful things that are going on in pockets, which I feel are going to connect those dots. That's going to drive that sea change that we're all looking for when it comes to recognizing and also accepting different levels of mental health, both at work but also in our social lives.
That definitely is a mic drop moment. Thank you very much for joining us on the Mental Space podcast today, Lianne. If you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I have, if you feel it's improved your intellect, I definitely feel that mine's gone up a little notch there. Please remember you can subscribe to the Mental Space podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, that button's just there. It says subscribe. Just click it. It makes a big difference to the amount of guests we can get onto this podcast. Likewise, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, we're there. But once again, Lianne Braganza D'Sylva, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you. We enjoyed it.
And we